Something fundamental just shifted in the Middle East, and the media refuses to call it what it is. While American officials parade across television screens declaring total victory over Iran, Iran's national security establishment is broadcasting an entirely different message to the world. Not through quiet back channels or sympathetic leaks, but openly, on the record, in translated statements that the American press is almost completely ignoring. That gap between what Washington is saying and what Tehran is saying is where the real story actually lives. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through every piece of it, because what is unfolding right now is not a victory celebration. It is the opening chapter of something far more dangerous than the conflict itself. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, now is the time. Hit that button, because what I'm about to lay out for you, the statements, the strikes, the economic damage, the threats, this is the kind of comprehensive analysis you simply will not find assembled in one place anywhere else. We do the digging so you don't have to. Let's go. Not 72 hours back. Further. Let's go back to the logic that launched all of this. The Trump administration entered this conflict with a clear theory: deliver a devastating blow early, wipe out Iran's leadership, shatter the government's morale, and watch the Islamic Republic tear itself apart from the inside. It was the Venezuela playbook: swift, decisive, finished before anyone could mount a coherent defense. According to reporting drawing on multiple intelligence analysts cited in the Washington Post, the strategy was heavily built on the assumption that eliminating senior figures would create a leadership vacuum too deep to be filled quickly enough to sustain any coordinated military response. That assumption was wrong. Here is what actually happened. Iran's top leadership was not wiped out. The supreme leader was not killed. The governmental structure was not disrupted beyond its capacity to recover. And now, from the highest levels of the Iranian state, the message coming back to Washington is the opposite of surrender. This is not Iranian propaganda I'm promoting. I'm showing you precisely what is being said, by whom, and why it matters. Because you are not hearing it assembled this way on American television. Statement number 1. Iran's foreign minister issued a formal statement directly contradicting the White House's characterization of where things stand. Foreign Minister Araghchi, and the exact wording here matters, stated publicly that Iranian President Pezeshkian's expressed willingness to pursue regional de-escalation, contingent on neighboring countries refusing to allow their airspace, territory, or waters to be used against Iran, was, in his words, almost immediately killed by President Trump's misreading of our capabilities, resolve, and intentions. Read that again. Iran's foreign minister stated that Iran had extended an opening, conditional, yes, but an opening, and that the Trump administration's response destroyed it within hours. The statement continued, "If Mr. Trump is seeking escalation, that is precisely what our armed forces have long been prepared for, and precisely what he will receive. Responsibility for any intensification of Iran's exercise of self-defense rests entirely with the U.S. administration." Then came a number that the American financial press should be covering aggressively, and largely is not. The foreign minister stated directly that Trump's week-long military campaign had already cost the United States $100 billion, not counting the economic fallout still to come when markets fully reopen. His precise framing? That cost will continue growing and will be transferred directly to ordinary Americans at the gas pump. $100 billion in under 2 weeks, and fuel prices are already climbing. That is statement number 1. Now here is where things get significantly worse. Statement number 2. Iran's National Security Council Chairman Ali Larijani gave a televised interview, translated and independently verified, in which he spelled out in explicit terms what Iran plans to do next. Larijani did not speak in diplomatic abstractions. He said, We are not going to let Donald Trump off the hook. He must pay the price. He martyred our leader and our people. More than 1,000 civilians have already been killed. We will not let it go until we retaliate in kind. Stop right there. 1,000 civilians. That figure, consistent across multiple sources including satellite imagery and congressional intelligence briefings, encompasses what occurred in Mianab, where an elementary school was struck by the U.S. military, killing approximately 150 children. That event is not contested by the intelligence community. It is being briefed to members of Congress. It happened. Larijani went further in his interview. He described the American strategic miscalculation in specific terms. He said the U.S. plan had 2 stages. First, eliminate enough Iranian leadership to bring down the governmental structure. Second, watch the population turn against the Islamic Republic. Americans believed this would be over very quickly, he said. Their strategy was to finish the war fiercely, but in a short window. But they didn't count on Iranians not letting them walk away. Now they are desperate. What Larijani is describing is not posturing. It is a strategic assessment that is, at minimum, internally consistent with the facts on the ground. The Islamic Republic has not collapsed. The population has not risen up. According to analysis from multiple regional observers cited in Reuters and Al Jazeera, the U.S. strikes have instead triggered a wave of nationalist unity inside Iran that has paradoxically strengthened the government's domestic standing, including among segments of the population that were previously hostile to the regime. Trump went in to liberate the Iranian people. He ended up rallying them behind the very government he set out to destroy. That is statement number 2. If this is making sense to you, if this feels like the analysis that has been missing, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We are covering this story every day in real time, with the sourcing you need to genuinely understand what is happening. Statement number 3, and this is the one nobody is connecting to everything else. The Strait of Hormuz is functionally closed. 20% of the world's crude oil supply moves through that narrow passage. Right now, it is not moving. Kuwait's state oil company, Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, OPEC's 5th largest producer, has announced precautionary reductions to oil and refinery output because it cannot export. Qatar has halted oil production. 2 fuel depots at Kuwait International Airport were struck by Iranian drone attacks, producing, according to eyewitness accounts and video verified by multiple outlets, massive fires across the facility. And here is what the Trump administration's response has been: naval escorts for oil tankers. The Iranian military's response to that proposal came from Qatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Headquarters. The spokesperson said, "We welcome the United States escorting oil tankers through the strait. Iranian forces are waiting for the Americans. Entry may be on the surface, but the end will be at the bottom of the Persian Sea." So the strait is closed. The U.S. is proposing naval escorts. Iran is saying it will sink them. And in the background, Donald Trump has quietly lifted sanctions on Russian oil, allowing Moscow to flood markets in India with discounted crude, in what appears to be a desperate attempt to suppress global prices before the midterm political consequences become unmanageable. It is not working. Fuel prices are rising regardless. That is statement number 3. Now let's talk about what is actually happening across the region, the dimension that disappears when American coverage fixates only on the U.S.-Iran binary. The Trump administration entered this conflict believing it could contain the blast radius. That belief has failed completely. Iran's response strategy, as it has grown clearer over recent days, is not to match the U.S. blow for blow inside Iranian borders. It is to export instability across the entire Gulf. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard has struck a skyscraper near Dubai. They have struck a social security building in Kuwait City. They struck the fuel depots at Kuwait International Airport. And in a development that received almost no coverage in the American press, The U.S. military destroyed Iranian naval vessel the Dana using a torpedo as it departed Sri Lanka, where it had been participating in a naval parade as a guest of the Indian government, unarmed by agreement. The Sri Lankan Navy rescued approximately 30 surviving crew members. The United States did not render assistance. These are not isolated incidents. They represent a deliberate Iranian strategy to ensure every Gulf state feels the consequences of hosting American military operations. The foreign minister's earlier statement to neighboring countries was unambiguous. Stop permitting U.S. forces to use your airspace and territory, and we will stop striking you. Continue, and you are a target. The result? Qatar's emir met with Trump not out of solidarity, but out of alarm. Because Doha has spent 2 decades and hundreds of billions of dollars constructing an image of itself as a safe, modern, investment-friendly city-state. That image is now in ruins, literally and figuratively. Every time an Iranian drone appears over the Gulf skyline, remember what Trump actually did to the Gulf monarchs who spent years cultivating his favor, hosting his visits, purchasing his properties, and donating to his inaugural funds. He took their money and then ignited a war that is burning down everything they constructed. As Bloomberg has reported, Qatar alone has committed hundreds of billions in U.S. investment arrangements. And now their airports are under fire. Inside Iraq, where the United States still has troops deployed, the parliament is chanting, "Death to America" on the chamber floor. The sectarian fault lines that were barely holding, Shia, Sunni, Kurdish, are fracturing again in real time. The Trump administration did not simply restart a war. It destabilized the entire regional architecture simultaneously. One thing deserves particular attention. The foreign minister's statement referenced a document produced by Trump's own National Intelligence Council, representing input from all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies, which reportedly concluded that war with Iran is destined to fail. That document existed before the strikes began. Arakchi asked directly in his statement, were these warnings conveyed? That question is not rhetorical. It is a public record challenge to the American intelligence and policy-making apparatus. It is saying, your own analysts told you this would not work. Someone decided not to listen or chose to disregard it. Meanwhile, on the American side, officials are appearing on television saying the United States intends to seize all of Iran's oil reserves. A direct quote from a senior U.S. official on state media. This is a long-term gain because what we want to do is get such massive oil reserves in Iran out of the hands of terrorists. Ultimately, we're not going to have to worry about the issues in the Strait of Hormuz because we're going to get all of the oil out of the hands of terrorists. Seize Iranian oil. That's the plan being discussed openly on American television. Let that land for a moment. The United States military does not currently control Iranian territory. The Iranian government has not fallen. The Iranian military has not surrendered. The strait is closed. $100 billion has already been spent. Civilian infrastructure, desalination plants, oil refineries, and elementary school has been struck. And the publicly stated plan is, we'll seize their oil. This is what a credibility collapse looks like in real time. Not one dramatic moment, a slow accumulation of statements that no longer connect to reality. What does all of this mean for you personally? If you filled your tank this week, you already have your answer. Oil prices are climbing. The Strait of Hormuz closure is not theoretical. Markets were already pricing in a risk premium on crude before the latest round of escalation. According to analysis from Goldman Sachs cited in the Financial Times, every week the strait remains restricted adds estimated upward pressure on global oil prices in the range of several dollars per barrel. Pressure that moves directly and immediately into what you pay at the pump. If you have a retirement account, watch it closely. The energy sector is volatile in both directions right now. Some producers gain from elevated prices. Others face supply chain exposure. The broader market has not fully accounted for a prolonged conflict with no clear exit path, because as of this recording, the official American position is still that this ends quickly. When that assumption is revised, and it will be, the repricing will be sharp. If you live in a state where energy employment is concentrated, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, the near-term picture looks like a windfall. Higher crude prices mean stronger drilling revenue. But the long-term instability in Gulf shipping lanes affects refinery inputs, LNG export capacity, and the entire downstream supply chain in ways that aren't yet fully visible. And if you have any exposure to defense contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed, Northrop, the $100 billion figure the Iranian foreign minister cited, if even partially accurate, tells you something significant about the pace of military spending right now. None of this is theoretical. It is already in motion. The only question is how far it goes. I see two paths from here. There is no middle ground. Not anymore. Path 1. A back-channel agreement takes shape. The Omani mediation track, historically the quietest and most productive channel between Washington and Tehran, produces a framework. Iran agrees to halt strikes on Gulf infrastructure. The U.S. agrees to pause strikes on Iranian civilian infrastructure. The strait reopens partially. Oil prices stabilize. Both sides declare success to their domestic audiences and begin the slow, difficult work of negotiating forward. This path requires the Trump administration to accept something short of full Iranian capitulation, which means accepting something that contradicts what the president has already said publicly. That is a meaningful political obstacle, but not an insurmountable one. Pragmatism has a tendency to surface when the financial toll becomes impossible to deny. Path 2. The spiral. Iran strikes U.S. naval assets in the Persian Gulf, directly or through proxies. The U.S. retaliates against Iranian military command infrastructure. One of the Gulf states absorbs a strike large enough to trigger a formal military response. The Iraqi parliament's rhetoric becomes militia action. The Houthis, the Lebanese factions, the Iraqi armed groups, the entire regional axis activates simultaneously. The strait closes completely. Oil reaches levels that begin to structurally damage the global economy. And the United States finds itself in precisely the kind of open-ended, multi-front Middle Eastern war that a majority of American voters, by every available polling measure, went to the ballot box in 2024 specifically to prevent. The foreign minister said it plainly. The American people voted to end involvement in costly quagmires in the Middle East. Instead, they ended up with an administration that Netanyahu, after decades of failed efforts, finally managed to drag into fighting Israel's wars. Is that accurate? Is it spin? Is it somewhere in between? That is for you to judge. But what is not spin is the $100 billion. What is not spin is the closed strait. What is not spin is the elementary school in Mianab. What is not spin is death to America on the floor of the Iraqi parliament. Those are facts, and they point in one direction. Here is what I know with certainty. Every core assumption the Trump administration carried into this campaign has been tested against reality, and every single one has fallen short. The government didn't collapse. The population didn't revolt. The leadership wasn't decimated. The war didn't end in days. Oil prices didn't come down. The neighboring states aren't holding. And the Iranian state, whatever its very real flaws, has demonstrated that it is capable of sustaining a military response while simultaneously running an effective regional destabilization campaign. That is not a victory. That is not even a stalemate. That is an unfolding strategic failure being managed in real time through a fog of competing official narratives, none of which align with one another. We have seen this before. Not at this scale, not with these stakes, but we have seen what happens when a military campaign built on flawed assumptions meets a determined adversary with nothing left to lose. The outcomes are never clean. They are never fast. And the people who pay the price are almost never the ones who made the decisions. 3 questions I want to leave you with. Sit with them. Return to them in a week. Is Trump neutralizing a threat or manufacturing the conditions for a generation of new ones? When the financial bill for this war arrives, and it will arrive, at the pump, in your portfolio, in the federal deficit, who will be held accountable? And the one that keeps me up at night: if Iran's own foreign minister is accurately describing a $100 billion price tag, a closed strait, and a war the U.S. intelligence community said was destined to fail, what was the actual plan? Leave your answers in the comments. I read every one. Hit like if this gave you something the mainstream coverage isn't. Subscribe to this channel if you want to stay ahead of this story as it develops. Turn on notifications, because this is moving fast, and the next development could come within hours. We'll be here every day, every development. No spin, just the full picture.